Hi everyone, this is Elohim. Thanks for coming back here to this little show that we had in YouTube. The person with who I will be talking today is Levi Rowland. So if you remember the show that we did last year in 2020, the idea of our conception of the show is humanize the author, bring different people from different backgrounds, from different parts of the community, and trying to bring everybody together here in uh, a small space where everybody can feel related with someone, everybody can feel identified, because that's very important that everybody feels welcome. The person with who we will be talking today is Levi Rowland. He's a teacher, interpreter, cartomancy reader. He's an Alexandrian priest and a witch. He is the host of Covendom that he does with his colleague Brian Cain, who is also another Alexandrian priest, every Friday via YouTube and Facebook. Now he's also an author. That's new. He's the author of The Art Cosmic, The Magic of Traditional Astrology. This book is entirely good, has amazing illustrations inside, and that's something that we don't find too much in the markets in this moment, because most of the books are just theory and theory and theory, and they make you try to imagine the illustrations, usually because publisher decisions. But in this book, you will find all the illustrations that you need. He talks about every planet in traditional astrology. He gives you spells. He gives you information about Kabbalah, etc., etc., etc. Levi specializes in these topics because he teaches traditional astrology, Hermetic Kabbalah, and cartomancy. Levi comes from Appalachia and Tennessee and Kentucky, and now he's living in New Orleans. So, how are you doing, Levi?
I am doing great. I am doing really well. It's been a lovely day here in New Orleans. We got a little break from our terrible heat, so it's been kind of nice. How are you?
Great, been great. I'm very happy to have you here. I was trying to bring you last year, but was happening COVID and was a lot of
Yeah,
things happening and was the events. So I decided to postpone all of these projects for the next year, that is now. So I'm very happy to finally have you here. Uh,
likewise.
so I have some questions for you. The first one is, you was raised in Kentucky, Appalachia, Tennessee,
hmm
uh, and now you are living in New Orleans. How do you feel was this transition for you?
I came to New Orleans for career reasons in the beginning. I'm a teacher, as well as, outside of the occult world, I work in education, and my job brought me to New Orleans. And I've been working in New Orleans in public schools for this will be my ninth year, 10th year in education, but ninth year here in New Orleans. It was it was so dramatic, the moving to New Orleans from such a, I come from a very conservative, sort of area of our country. Um, I honestly think of my entire life as spinning on an axis of before New Orleans and post New Orleans. This is a city that is that it's like New York. I mean, you're in New York. It's that sort of strong of a culture, right? Is that I kind of do separate before and after. So I would say it was massive. It was a huge transition.
Wow, I can imagine. I don't have the opportunity to know these places, but I just see them in films. And when I see
hmm
these places like Tennessee and I see New Orleans, it's like, wow, this is a very interesting contrast.
Very different.
So, Levi, how do you find the Alexandrian witchcraft? Because you are not just a witch, you are initiate and you are a
hmm
priest of the
Yep,
Alexandrian tradition.
I am. I'm a high priest of Alexandrian Witchcraft. It's a little weird. I grew up very religious personally. My family were not very, my family is not particularly religious, and they're Protestants. They're Free Will Baptists. It's a small type of Protestant Christianity, popular where I'm from. I converted to Catholicism when I was very young, and I was a very devout Catholic through most of my youth. A convert, though. I was sort of a, fish out of water. And I always carried this fascination with Hermetic philosophy and the occult, which kind of, to be honest, is kept alive in the Catholic Church. They're not always proud of it, and sometimes they fight it, but it's always there. It's in, it's. I think of the fabulous book Meditations on the Tarot, which the prologue to was written by one of the most respected Catholic cardinals in recent history, Hans Urs von Balthasar. So you're able to sort of play with the occult. And I think moving to New Orleans was such an amazing radical shift in my life that I finally gave up basically trying to square these circles of life. And I had left the church long before I came here. I was a seeker, I was a non-believer, a very angry non-believer for a while. I went through the whole gamut of emotions. But I finally just gave in to what I had always wanted, which was to plumb this area, the occult, magic, all of that, with an honest and open heart, and no longer have it to be part of something, you know, more respectable or whatever. And the thing that led me to Alexandrian witchcraft is two things. There's two things. The first is the goddess. You know, everybody who watches Covendom, or if you do watch it, I am sort of a fanatical goddess worshiper. So there's literally a shrine to Hera behind me, but I'm a fanatical lover of the concept of the goddess, and so it's very much alive in craft. And the second was something a lot more practical, but I think powerful too, which is it worked. I've been in a lot of quests in my life, and this is the one where God showed up. So, I mean, once she shows up, why would you go anywhere else, right? You know, so it clicked, and I never looked back.
Levi, you are talking about your journey, so I have two more questions here. The first one is physically about the journey, because I told you a lot, you know that. I am a very good stalker. I know that you travel a lot. You have the opportunity to travel to different places. I think that you have pictures in Greece and Egypt. How do you think that this in some way shift your perception about witchcraft and religion? Because I am very fan of Covendom. I see it every Friday. You know that. I'm always in the chat because
I know we love you there.
It's very interesting, all the topics, because most of these talks about witchcraft are always the same, but you and Brian always come with these very hard topics to take, and you talk, you give facts, you speak about history, you give names, you talk about the books, and you read all of this material. So you are very smart on this. How do you think that these travels in some way shift you or inspire you in your tradition?
I think one of the reasons I think Covendom is different is Brian and I were very adamant that we were going to come to Covendom with the foundational belief that witchcraft is a religion. Especially the contemporary witchcraft revival of Gerald Gardner and Alex and Maxine Sanders, my religion, the Gardnerian line, which is also, you know, I consider a part of my religion too, just a different cult within it. And so we do come off in Covendom, I'm fully aware, as very strident, right? Like we come off as almost as zealots. But I think we did that on purpose to sort of be a different kind of voice in the witchcraft community, because I agree with you, there's a lot of shows where it's all the same. You know, it's just talking about the same spells and the same elements, and witchcraft's whatever you want it to be. And Brian and I show up and we're like, nope, it's all about the goddess, and it's all about religion and initiation. And I think that's important to offer that to people. As for the travels, it ties to that. That's why I started with that. You know, when I went to Stonehenge, or when I went to Eleusis in Greece, where, you know, the mystery religions were enacted, or the temple of Komombo in Egypt, what always struck me was magic and what we would call craft now, but they wouldn't have, obviously, you know, pre-modern times. But it was always this concept of powerful religious experience. You know, we didn't build bookshops, we built temples, right? We didn't build stores, we built temples. You know, we built grand temples to celebrate the cycles and the gods and magic and the life and death and rebirth of all nature. So that's what I like to experience when I travel. You know, and I have, you know, geared my travels towards that. So it has been Egypt, Greece, London, you know, it's been the places that matter to me religiously. But I love seeing that. I love going to a place and being like, look what we did, you know, look what we as believers in the cycles of magic and life constructed. You know, I like that.
Yeah, got it. Thank you for the answer. Thank you for the elaboration of the answer, because everything that you are saying is very interesting. Everything that you're saying is very interesting. So before a question that I'm trying to formulate here is, before being initiated, we find the religion and we initiate in the path. If we find ourselves in there, like we relate. After being initiated, how do you feel this change your vision about the craft? How, because obviously it's like come from where you come to New Orleans. It's a before and after. Before and after being initiated, how do you think that this change or shift your perspective about the craft?
I think the biggest perception is that my craft is a lived religion. So I think there's a huge perception of witchcraft right now as a collection of disparate practices, that it's just something that you pick up sort of like a hobby. Like people now say on social media that they're into witchcraft the same way that they're into a certain type of music, right? And I think that's because witchcraft has been divorced from sustained practice. There is a community of some sorts in the wider pagan world and the wider world of witchcraft, but it's very loosely connected. And there's not a consistent set of practices. There's no discipline to it. There's no required belief or action or whatever. But the biggest change for me post initiation is that I live my craft. I don't get into witchcraft on Wednesdays or whatever because it's fun, or pick up a book that interests me. I live it. So I go to Coven every week. I have a temple in my home. I went on pilgrimages for this. It's a very different way of living out the concept of witchcraft that I think is more popular. And so post initiation, I mean, it's a priesthood. You are as much within a living religious tradition as a Catholic priest would be, or a santero or whatever. Like, we live it. And so it's no longer just an idea. It is a lived practice post initiation.
Wow, I will take notes of everything that you are saying. I made this. I have two silly questions. I need to ask something.
Do silly. I'm here for silly. It's fine. I can't always be so serious.
The first one. Do you remember your first spell?
First spell ever, or first spell as
first
an initiate?
Spell that you remember in your life that you did?
In my life, when I was very young, I was furious at a cousin, and I had a voodoo doll that somebody had bought, oddly enough, on a vacation to New Orleans, and I never knew that I would ever come here or live here or anything like that. I was like 12, and I had gotten into the voodoo doll, and I'd done some research on, New Orleans voodoo or whatever. And my cousin was like, none of that. He was being very rude, and that none of it was real. And so I asked him to give me his fingernails, and I put them in a voodoo doll and said a bunch of words and did a whole thing. And he did get food poisoning the next day, which has always been this hilarious story that I remember. Whether it's coincidence or the will of God, I'm not going to make any claims, but that was probably the first.
Wow. I don't believe in coincidence.
Maybe I cursed one of my cousins at 12. God help me.
Maybe. The second one is, do you remember your first book on witchcraft? The first one that you buy or find?
I'm sure that I had novels. I read a lot, so I'm sure that I had like novels about witches that I loved or whatever. But my first introduction to serious witchcraft was actually the Witch's Bible by the Farrars, which is funny because they were Alexandrian. So looking back, it was like a circle. But
Yes.
That was probably my first. I didn't really appreciate it as much at the time, but I will say it was my first introduction to contemporary witchcraft. It was the Witch's Bible by the Farrars.
Yes, and it's a very deep book to start, because most of the people start with a book on spells, love spells or something like that.
Yes, I know.
You go directly to the deep.
I went straight to the scriptures.
Yeah, I noted. Okay. One of the things that you always talk in Covendom, and this is very important because it's like one of the signs of your show, podcast, is that you make a lot of emphasis, a lot of how important is the coven. And I love this, that you always remark that the coven is not your family, it's not your friends, it's your coven, it's something different, but you can have a relation but totally out of the coven. How important is the role of the coven for you?
For us, you can practice alone, but you cannot effectively be a witch the way we determine it alone. This is part of our foundational principles. Witchcraft is a collective practice. Brian and I bring up this concept a lot in Covendom of the other, like in a philosophical or psychological sense, whether you like, sort of look at it from a Jungian perspective of anima and animus, or whether you're looking at it as self and other, God and goddess, whatever. All of those archetypes are ways to sort of other your ego, which is a source of power, right? To see it reflected back in something else. So for a practicing initiate, there is no craft outside of the coven, right? If I were not able to find a coven, it would be borderline impossible to live my witchcraft out, which forces me, therefore, to make important decisions about my witchcraft. Our covens are not our families. They're not necessarily our friends. You can have certain relationships. Our line of craft uses something that Maxine Sanders initiated called the no socializing rule, which is if you don't know somebody before you're initiated, you don't get to like hang out with them outside of coven and have these very quirky friendships. We want to preserve the sanctity of practice. So the coven becomes this place of intense power and not a place of snacks and movie nights.
I understand that. And it's very important. How do you remark that? Because especially now after 2020, most of these groups and comments many times are just online group. You go to the store to buy something together, and it's not much spellcasting or really teaching. It's more like the group with who you go everywhere and you just take some selfies. Oh, this is me.
Exactly.
That happens a lot. About your book. Now we can go to your book. Promotional picture here. Do you teach traditional astrology, hermetic Kabbalah, cartomancy, and you specialize a lot in traditional witchcraft, always. Why did you choose to start? Because when someone turns in an author, we never are sure how many books we will do. Maybe you can do one book in all your life. Maybe you can do a dozen of books. But the fact is that you start, and how do you choose the topic of traditional astrology? Because it's a very nice topic, but you could go easier and do a book on spells.
Yes.
Why something so elaborate?
I think the reason is because my favorite thing, personally, as a practitioner, is the sort of spiritual and philosophical power of these systems. I think that in the modern world, in the postmodern world, in the shadow of Christendom, right, that we all live in the Western world in particular, there's sort of an emptiness, right, for organizing principles. So you get interested in something and you take a little something from it, and that's great. But then the next week it's something else, and it's very disconnected. So I'm very interested in systems that are holistic and sort of take into account everything. They're very large. And I like that because I think a lot of people are hungry for that right now. If this was a different time period, I might not have written The Art Cosmic because I wouldn't have, seen that as important. But I do think that we live in a time where people who are approaching spirituality, religion, witchcraft, magic, they don't have a lot to hold on to. It's very, very empty in some places, unfortunately. And what I like about traditional astrology is it's impossible to do that with this system. Like in modern astrology, it's very easy to do. You can take the gods out of it. You can take the divinity out of it. You can secularize it to the nines. You can make it all about pop psychology. You can't really do that with traditional astrology. It kind of rises or falls on its belief system, on its totality. And I think as a teacher, what I've noticed in classes and when people come to us, in the coven, or when people come to us, even just me personally, they're hungry for something more cosmic, something larger than themselves. It's almost like we live in this prison of self all the time. And I think traditional astrology is kind of like a medicine, to be honest, against that.
Got it. I appreciate what are you saying, because I was the victim of that for a long time, because when I have the freedom to study everything that I want in the esoteric path. So I was many times taking courses of Feng Shui and palmistry and tarot cards, and I was just jumping from one to another because I have the option. But for a long time, for like 6 or 7 years, I've never specialized in something. I just was picking like you said, from week to week. They are offering classes of Feng Shui there, I go to take it. They are offering classes on crystals in there, I go to take it. And when I have now the opportunity to moderate, that take a lot of time, when that finally happens, I decided to specialize in something. And in your book, I see that because this is true. Most of the book, I remember that someone says to me, "What do you can write that is really new in astrology if we have so much time writing about it?"
Yeah.
And it's when you take these books on astrology, I'm not saying that all, but most of them feel like it's just the same topic, but from a different vision of the author, but very new age, trying to blend astrology with crystal, astrology with tarot. They're just trying to blend and create something that is actually there.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things why I appreciate the book is because you dedicate, you know, are running in the book. You have a lot of material here. It's a very big book. And you don't take a chapter for all the planets and the stars. You dedicate a whole chapter to every
Mm-hmm.
planet, to every star, to every position, cosmologically talking. You take many references in the book. That is pretty important because now most of the books, including myself, my own books, is a lot about how I feel in magic. So I just throw my mind in there. Yours take a lot. It's like reading the whole library. It has all the reference here in the book, very well made. I really appreciate that. And
Thank you.
that's the reason why I really enjoy the book so much. And I'm actually using them. I have another question here. That question was, why do you choose in this topic for the book, traditional astrology? How was the creative process for you? From the data you decide and says to yourself, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to do this crazy path, I'm going to write a book on astrology. How was that for you?
I think I actually went through a lot of anxiety because what you're saying is true. It's actually very hard, I would say almost impossible to write something new about astrology. Unless you do what a lot of modern astrologers do, which is to find something very, very new in astronomy, like a new meteor or a new
Exactly.
astrological event, and then you try to turn it into something within the system of astrology. I usually don't like that because I think it jumps the gun. The example I use in the art cosmic is Chiron, which is always sold as a meteor, but now scientists are saying it probably isn't, or an asteroid. I keep saying meteor, I mean asteroid. Now it probably isn't that. And so, we're jumping the gun a little bit. So I actually was very anxious about writing this book. The other reason is because astrologers are persnickety people. They will catch every error. They're very married to whatever system they use. So the comments will be brutal. I'm waiting. It's okay. I've accepted it spiritually. But for me, the process was I reread a lot of classics. So I reread Ptolemy, Manilius, Ibn Saul and whatnot. And I said to myself, what is my approach to all of this? Like looking at this as this huge, enormous, millennia-long tradition that disagrees with itself a lot, and that has been relegated to pseudoscience by modernists anyway. What do I actually have to say? And I think my biggest takeaway and what my process became is where's the magic? The actual practice of this as a spiritual practice, not as a pseudoscience, not as new age psychology, but what is the magic of this? And that's why the book is loaded with spells and rituals, why I have a whole section on the magic of each planet within their corresponding chapters. I wanted this to be a magical book, not a rehashing of something that already exists.
I think I lost you for a second, but don't worry.
I'm back.
Yes, I'm back here. It probably is me because I live very close to the river. Literally, literally, I am next to the river. My backyard is the river that connects Queens with Manhattan. So I always lost the connection. So
Mm-hmm.
it's on me. So this, how was? Thanks for the answer. How was 2020 for you?
Rough. I mean, I am a public school teacher, like I said, before. So that was rough. We were essential employees. We had virtual learning. So that part was very difficult. I was very lucky. I lived with my wonderful partner, and so I was not alone. And I was able to, have a wonderful support system at home, which I'm cherish and love very much. so it was a mixed bag, but honestly, I think there's a lot of effort right now to try to make to sanitize everything and be like, it's all great now and we're good. But it was damaging. I mean, frankly, it was very depressive. It was very dark. You know, being disassociated from people, or disconnected, I mean to say, that was rough on me. You know, and I think owning that is more honest, maybe.
Yeah, got it. Levi, imagine that I don't know you. You are in your store, in the
Okay.
store in a store that you are working, and I go there and I choose this book. I don't know anything about astrology. How do you convince me to buy the book? What do you tell me?
That's a damn good question. I'm not the best salesman. I'm very wordy. I think God bless the people who helped me edit this, but edit this book. I think the biggest thing I would say to you is if are you interested in astrology? And obviously you are if you're buying this book. So I'd get that out of the way. And then once I knew that you were, I'd say, do you want it to actually mean something to you? Like, you know, there's a lot of ways that you can read your horoscope online. You can get an app on your phone to tell you what planets are where and when Mercury retrograde happens and, you know, whatnot. But do you actually want this to mean something? Like, would you be interested in knowing that astrology, no matter how popular it gets and how easy it can seem, has a deeper core to it, that it has something to say to you? Wouldn't that be interesting? And I would say that this book attempts to show you that. It attempts to show you that this system has something to say spiritually, not just about whether or not your girlfriend's going to return your text messages or whether or not you're going to be a better accountant than marketing manager. It has something better to say to you than that. And this book hopefully will show you that.
And also have illustrations.
And it does have lovely illustrations thanks to Christian Day, my publisher, who put a ton of work into creating the charts for this book. Astrology is very visual. Like,
exactly. I was in love of this chapter because I am obsessed. I have a little collection of books about Saturn in astrology. But most of the books are just, most of the times, when it's about astrology, like I said before, they just jump about the planets. So this is how affect you the planets, and they put a lot of information in one little chapter, and the rest of the book is most the vision of the author. When you go here, for example, chapter in this 7 part about Saturn, you have the correspondences here, the table with all the information, and all the graphics in the book are majestic. When I see it, this reminds me a lot to the new editions of the old books about San Cyprian, the King Solomon, all of these very old books that looks a lot like a grimoire, that looks very magical and don't look like something that was just made for selling very fast.
Thank God for Christian Day's editing skills.
Yes, and it's very complex. I mean, the level of information and all the spells that you have, and I like that is not just a bunch of spells. Okay, we have here Mercury. You want to do 1 or 2 rituals? Here's some rituals that you can do in your home. You want to work with Saturn? Here 2 rituals that you can do. It's most about the information that you receive, the knowledge, the wisdom, and less about all the spellcasting, because we have many books about the spellcasting.
We have a lot. Yes, we do.
Yes. Is now also something that we can say that is overwhelming. Is the level of book that how many spells you will do in a year. I mean,
I know, yeah.
Something else that you want to say?
I think the biggest thing is I wrote this book because any approach that you take to a magical system matches the effort that you put into it, right? So if you want to approach astrology or rune casting or feng shui or any other of the popular systems that have their worldviews, if you want to approach them in a very gentle way and you just want to pick up something here and there or have it impact maybe one little part of your life, that's cool. That's fine. I have no moral judgment to any of that. But I think a lot of these systems have a lot more depth to them that than we are letting ourselves experience, right? I'm sure this is true for all of them. If I had written this book on palmistry or tarot cards or whatever, I probably could have sussed out just as much meaning. I will say it's a lot easier with astrology because it's so cosmic and so large and so historical. But that's what I wanted to do with this, is like, there is something you can take from this that is transformative for you and for yourself within a community. It is not just about hobbies or tidbits of information. And whether people pick it up and love it or whether they pick it up and say, this is not for me, it's too heavy, that's fine. But I think we need more voices who are giving that option to people with our magical practices. We need to trust that not everything has to be a TikTok. And as much as I like social media, I'm not anti-social media. You know, I am a modernist, whether I like it or not. But I think we're underestimating people in the community. We just are. Like, people can handle a little bit more depth than they get thrown.
Yes, it's turning very superficial with the time. It's turning very fast, and so some things about witchcraft in social media is starting to feel like fast food. You just see it, just taste it, and just forget, and pass to the new flavor. It's a little weird, that situation. Levi, if someone want to find you, I know that you are not too much in social media because I stalled you like a crazy person. I stalled you a lot. And it's very complicated to find you. And we need your voice on Twitter. I continue voting for that.
Oh, God.
Yeah, we need you. How people can find you? Someone is looking for more information about you. Someone want to receive classes on you or something.
Yeah. I am on Instagram under LJ Rowland. That's my Instagram. I'm on Facebook under my real name. If it's about classes and stuff, I do almost everything right now through Hex. So if you follow Hex Covendom, which is every Friday when it's going on YouTube and Facebook through the Hex Education channel. But I do a lot of my classes through Hex. I'm actually teaching this weekend at Hex Fest. Yep. And I teach at WitchCon, which I did last year, and I'm doing this year, and I'm doing next year too. So it's usually through those. So if you follow those platforms, you will find me. But I'm not so unreachable. I know I can seem very aloof and old school and traditionalist, but I am not, I promise.
Thank you, Levi, for your time. Really appreciate this. I hope we can repeat it and do it again, probably with a next book in the future. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure. I'm so glad we did it.
Please, people, remember, look for Levi. His book is available everywhere. I go to put the links below in the description. And if you want to know more about this, about traditional astrology, about traditional witchcraft, Levi has this amazing show with Brian Kind that is Covendom. I will put the links below also in the description. It's very important to support these spaces, being virtual spaces or physical spaces where witches and people crazy like us can be ourselves. Because we don't have many of these places, so it's very important to give some support of the people who are behind all of this community. Not just the authors, also the owner store, also the organizers of these events, the host of the podcast, and these kind of people who are doing all the work, because this is a lot of work. Yes. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Levi.
Thank you so much, Elohim.